Welcome and good morning. As all of you know, the Adam Amanda Mental Health Rehabilitation Center, first of its kind in the country, is named for two young people who lost their lives in this mean illness. I'd like to take a moment for the audience to recognize the mothers of these two special people, Becky Baker and Marcia Knapp. My name's Jack Sherman, and I serve as president of the NAMI Ohio Board of Directors. It's my honor to be with all of you today for such a special and important event. We have a few changes in today's agenda, hence the small handwritten notes. Today at 1:30, Governor DeWine will be holding a press conference. He will be introducing legislation in response to the terrible tragedy in Dayton. Many of the proposals will have a significant impact on Ohio's mental health and addiction services. After I introduce the president of Ohio University and the mayor of Athens, I will introduce Lori Criss, director of Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Lori needs to leave early to be at the press conference. The reason for today's conference is that families and those living with mental illness in Southeast Ohio are so appreciative of the services that are available. However, we need more. NAMI Ohio is going to support the ADAMH boards and providers to expand services in the 21-county Appalachia area. Let's see. First on the agenda, today we have Ohio University President Dr. Nellis. Dr. M. Dwayne Nellis, the 21st President of Ohio University and an internationally recognized scholar and national higher education leader. Prior to arriving at Ohio University, Dr. Nellis served as the president of the University of Idaho and most recently Texas Tech University. Dr. Nellis is recognized nationally and internationally for his research that utilizes satellite data and geographic information systems to analyze various dimensions of the Earth's land surface. This research has been funded by more than 50 sources, such as NASA, the National Geographic Society, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Dr. Nellis received his bachelor's degree in Earth Sciences Geography at Montana State University and his master's and doctoral degrees in geography from Oregon State University. He and his wife, Ruthie, have two adult sons. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nellis.
Well, thank you, President Sherman, and thank you for that kind introduction. This is such an important topic that you are focused on today, and I want to welcome you to Ohio University as you have this important conference and dialogue. We're honored to host this here at our institution in the heart of Southeast Ohio, here in the foothills of Appalachia. Mental illness is a disease that can affect anyone at any time, and it certainly impacts all of our communities in Ohio, and we know specifically the communities of Southeast Ohio. And the resources needed to appropriately respond to these potential debilitating illnesses are often lacking. And it's my hope that the conference can move forward the discussion over these issues that relate to mental illness in support of those that are struggling with this disease, and that this discussion will lead to more services and improvement in care for those that are affected by mental illness. Ohio University is proud to be part of this discussion, and we want to work with all of you. We want to be a partner with all of you as we look for solutions. I'm also encouraged by the commitment from Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield towards mental health issues and housing issues here in Southeast Ohio, and I also want to thank NAMI Ohio and NAMI broadly across our nation for their support of this important conference and our work in this area. Appreciate all that they do. Here in Southeast Ohio, we do not have, again, the resources that many of the larger metropolitan areas have, not only across our state, but across our nation. What we do have, though, are a large number of very dedicated and committed professionals who are passionate about helping others, and they're represented certainly in this room. And I'm so impressed to see all of you here today, just as I encourage you to continue the work that you do and your work collaboratively. I'm also grateful to all of the statewide and national leaders who are here today with us at this important conference, and I thank each of you for the work that you do. We all must work as a team. We all must work in an integrated way to address this very, very important issue. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and I wish you all good wishes for a very successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nellis. NAMI Ohio is happy to be here at Ohio University for this event today. Now I'd like to welcome Steve Patterson, the mayor of the city of Athens, Ohio, to the stage.
Thank you, Jack. I was asked to welcome you to the city of Athens, and I somewhat apologize that I wasn't able to drum up better weather, but trust me, as dry as it's been, we need it. You know, as a health psychologist, research health psychologist, you know, I somewhat understand the roles that all of you play, and I laud you for that. You know, you look at Athens back in the 1800s, 1870 opened its doors up at the Ridges, the former Athens Asylum, and it was a beacon. It truly was a beacon for mental health throughout the entire state of Ohio. And as I look around the room, I see you as beacons of hope for those who are struggling. As a retired Air Force Air National Guards veteran, I also need to acknowledge the fact that we do lose 22 veterans every day to suicide, and a lot of that due to post-traumatic stress. And again, I look at all of you and know that you are all doing the hard work. You're the boots on the ground to help provide services for those who most need it. And for that, I am humbled to be standing up before you because, again, you are the beacons of hope. Welcome to the city of Athens. I agree and acknowledge and want to echo what President Nellis was saying, is I truly believe that you will have a rewarding and successful conference here today. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I'm happy to introduce Lori Criss, the Director of the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Lori has worked in the behavioral health field since 1992. She started her career with the Ohio Commission on Minority Health, immersed in how Ohio's communities respond to mental health and addiction for people of varying cultural and racial backgrounds. Then she worked for 18 years in community addiction and trauma treatment for homeless women and their children at Amethyst in Columbus, Ohio. In 2012, Lori joined the Ohio Council of Behavioral Health and Family Service Providers, representing nonprofit addiction treatment and prevention, mental health, and family service providers. Lori was named the Director of the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in January of 2019. A native of Mingo Junction, Ohio, Lori's roots and heart are in the Appalachian, Ohio. Please join me in welcoming Lori.
Only in this room would people be that excited about Mingo Junction. I guess, except if you're in Mingo Junction. It's such a great place to grow up, and I'm really grateful to be here for a lot of reasons. time with you is important, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to stay for the whole day like I originally planned. I do have several colleagues here from the department who are going to be participating and also following Governor DeWine's primary mission for all of us, which is to listen and to learn and then to put your ideas into action. So thank you again for hosting me today. I think, my slides are up on the sides. Okay. So the other reason is that Athens is a beautiful community. I appreciate all of the hosting that the university does, not just for this event, but the partnership that we have with the university and a number of research projects and helping us to advance prevention, treatment, and recovery initiatives. My daughter is a sophomore here, and she said the kids love the mayor, so she wanted me to let you know that. I thought that was a great comment. You might appreciate knowing that. So anyway, I do want to let you know about some top priorities in the time that we have here together. Governor DeWine is focused on helping people with mental illness and substance use disorders, probably more so than any leader that I've ever experienced, and that it is literally and without doubt, a top priority for him every day in the work that he does. And he talked about that a lot while he was preparing for office, but he talks about it every day as the governor of our state as well. On the first day that he was sworn into office, he started 3 initiatives, the first being Recovery Ohio, which is a team that works with him on the 30th floor of the Rife Center, which is where the governor's office is, and focuses all day, every day, on coordinating resources, policies, and opportunities for people living with mental illness and substance use disorders. And the focus is on a number of things, and I'll kind of go through those in a minute. The second thing he did was elevate prevention. And he asked that in our department, we have a deputy director who's focused on advancing prevention initiatives across the state and across the lifespan. And so we're looking at what we can do from prenatal through older adulthood to make sure that every Ohio citizen is experiencing mental health and wellness throughout the course of their life. And then the final thing is a focus on kids and families. He created an Office of Children's Initiatives that is really looking at how to support every child and every family in our communities, again, early childhood through early 20s, but also really family focused too. So not just helping kids, but knowing that kids live in the context of a family and what we can do to advance family work as well. So some of that work is looking at child welfare reform, supporting multi-system youth, so kids that are involved in a number of systems in the state of Ohio, and making our responses as supportive of those youth and families as possible. In the budget, which was called Investing in Ohio's Future, we had several initiatives that are really intended to move us forward in our approaches to mental health and addiction. And Ohio really has done a lot of creative foundational work that we can build upon. So we're not looking necessarily to completely reverse course on things, but to take us to the next level. And so in in our budget this year, we had these initiatives that are geared towards supporting you and your local communities in the work that you're doing. Crisis services is a big focus. We have a $37 million investment in crisis services across the state. Some of that's carryover from the previous budget. Some of that's meant to be really flexible so that families and individuals can get the supports needed if there's not already some resources. So an example of that might be that a young person needs to go to residential care. The family doesn't have money for room and board, but their insurance or Medicaid might cover the care there. These dollars could be used to pay for the room and board so the families would have the access they need to that kind of service. It might be used for transportation. We're having a crisis academy at the end of October, so October 28th, and the ADAMH boards, who are our partners at the county level, are bringing teams to that to plan for what crisis services need to look like. And we're cooperating with the Board Association and the PEG Foundation, and we're looking at what are the national models related to crisis intervention for both adults and for youth, and then how can we support communities in understanding those models and bringing them closer to home for every Ohioan. Because every Ohioan deserves the opportunity to be treated and recover in their home community where their natural supports are. So that's our focus there. We also have an $18 million investment in K through 12 prevention. So that's every classroom, every kid, every school across the state of Ohio, and supporting each district and really assessing what gaps they have and what services they need to help kids at each grade level get what they need developmentally to be socially and emotionally and mentally healthy and well, and to avoid substances and unhealthy relationships in their future life. Ohio Start is an initiative for kids who are involved in the child welfare system, and specifically because of parental substance use disorders. And the program is geared towards helping parents access addiction treatment services and young people access trauma treatment services, because we know it's a really traumatizing experience to be separated from family and also to have parents who may have an untreated addiction. And so this is helping the whole family heal. We're doing a lot of investment in statewide media campaigns. So the efforts there are really to help the general public understand what mental illness is, what addiction is, to help reduce stigma related to these conditions, to help people understand that they're illnesses, they're not moral failings, they're not bad choices, they are preventable, they're treatable, and people recover, and to give people resources to connect to services and supports if they need them as well. So we'll be rolling more of those out. And our efforts there to use evidence-based, so things we know are research-driven to work, and also that make sense in a local community. So not one campaign for the whole state of Ohio, but making sure that what we develop and that we share for your use is usable in your community. Expanding specialty dockets, drug courts, mental health courts, these are things that we know people have great success with getting support, and having the opportunity to not have a criminal record, but to have movement forward in their recovery. And so we're expanding specialized dockets by 60 courts over the 4 years that Governor DeWine is currently elected for, and at least 30 dockets in these 2 years. Workforce is a critical need across the state. We know that's true in Appalachia for sure, that we have to do more to develop the workforce. And so we have initiatives geared towards retaining current professionals in the workforce, helping people advance degrees and credentials so that they're practicing at a higher level, and also bringing people into the workforce. And then another part of that is really helping what we call the citizen workforce, so working with law enforcement to make sure that they have the training they need to support families and individuals with mental health and substance use disorders. Also to help with librarians, school teachers, restaurant owners, anyone in our community who's really on the front lines of interacting with people with these illnesses, so that they have the skills they need to help support them in community. And then the final one to highlight here is our licensure and certification. We want to have a customer-friendly experience that's faster and can get services operating more quickly and help people be successful with our regulations. So we have an investment there too. So Recovery Ohio, I mentioned that at the beginning as well. There was a committee, and there are a few people who were on the committee here, former Governor Strickland, Chief Ware, I'm not sure if, I don't want to miss anyone, but there were 30 people from around the state of Ohio with a variety of experiences, people with lived experience in recovery, family members, ADAMH boards, law enforcement, clergy, and they helped review all of the different opportunities that Ohio has to make Ohio a better place for people to live in recovery and to have services and supports that they need. 75 actionable recommendations came out of that, and they are focused on a number of different areas. I think I have a slide on that. Yeah, so here are the areas that these 75 recommendations are related to. And I won't read those to you, but the report is available. It's written in plain English, you know, that someone who doesn't do this all day, every day can really grab onto some things. We're working at the state level to coordinate how to take those ideas and move them into action. There are a lot of things in there that you could grab onto and use in your local communities as well. And so I encourage you to find that report and take a look at what's there. And if you have specific ideas that you want to feed forward, let us know those things as well. So the thing that I wanted to kind of end with and really spend a little more time thinking about today is how we can better connect Ohio's institutions to Ohio's community services. And when I talk about institutions, I think largely for this space, we're thinking about hospital services and nursing homes and how we can help people with mental illness live in community instead of spending a great deal of time in those settings. Our hospitals really should be available for people who need crisis care or acute care for a brief period of time, and all of our efforts are focused on helping a person stabilize and get well, and then have a good plan for moving back into community and staying there. And so we want to do a lot of work, and we already are, in taking us to the next level with the relationships between the 6 state hospitals in Ohio and our community partners, but also to bring into that fold the private psychiatric hospitals that are operating around the state that have more capacity than what we can offer alone at the state hospital system, and how we can best engage with those providers for quality care and to really support families in times of crisis when a person has a mental health condition that needs that level of care, whether that's an adult or a young person in our families. We want to engage those systems better. We're doing a number of things on that front. We've started a group for patients who we see frequently at the hospital, so several admissions a year perhaps, and what we can do to help make sure that we've got the full continuum of supports in community care and that we're planning for that appropriately at the community level as well. The other thing we're looking at is how we can build out that continuum. And the Adam and Amanda Center here in Athens is a great example of an opportunity that communities have to help people avoid hospitalization by using that as sort of respite care if necessary, or to have a safe place to transition out of hospital when maybe they don't need that level of care, but they still need support and structure and some time just to stabilize and get connected to housing and community services. So how we can build more stops along the way between hospital and independent living and really create opportunities for individuals and families to thrive. So part of that too is a housing plan. And so it's great to see that NAMI and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield are sponsoring this event today so that we have time to really think about what housing needs to look like, particularly in Appalachian communities, right? I know that in Columbus, Cleveland, it's easier to develop an 80-unit apartment building that will have rent and utility subsidies that support all of the need. But in some counties, you might need 10, 25 supportive housing units and not this bigger project. And how are we making sure that at the state level, we're putting in place the resources that you need? And not just the capital dollars, but the rent and utility subsidies too, and some really creative work that we can do to engage landlords and make people see that when housing is provided to a person in recovery or a person living with or experiencing mental illness or addiction, it can be the most stabilizing factor that they have, right? I love SAMHSA's definition of recovery, which is health, home, purpose, and community. Home is right in the middle of there. We're not just looking for housing, we're looking for a place where people feel safe and connected and can live to the best and fullest potential that they have. So that's work that we're doing, not just at the department, but we're working with other departments at the state level. And I know you'll hear from some of my colleagues today about some of the work that we have underway. My time is up, and I know that there's a lot more that we could go into. So I'm looking forward to future events where we have some more time together and we can dive into ideas or questions and answers that you might have for me. But really appreciate the time together and wish you the best conference today, and looking forward to the learning that comes out of it. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to introduce today's event moderator, former Ohio Governor Ted Strickland. Governor Strickland served as the 68th governor of Ohio. Governor Strickland has a PhD in counseling psychology and has formerly worked as a psychologist in the criminal justice field. Recently, as you heard, he served on the Recovery Ohio Task Force and is committed to improving the mental health service systems for all Ohioans. Thank you, Governor Strickland, for joining us today.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am happy to be here. Terry, thank you for allowing me to be the host of this wonderful gathering. I'm just so pleased about Lori being where she is, because she's from Mingo Junction, and that is in the heart of Appalachia. And she's doing great work, as is the governor on these important issues. I am Ted Strickland. Long before I became a politician, I was a psychologist. And during those years, I was able to work in the old State Psychiatric Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, much like the facility that was located here in Athens, Ohio. I worked on the admissions ward. That's where the most acutely ill people come when they are admitted to the hospital. Part of that time, I also did probate pre-screening. I would go out into the community and talk with people who had been referred by family members or neighbors or whoever that were thought to be perhaps dangerous to themselves or others because of their mental illness. You know, that old hospital wasn't perfect. But after leaving that hospital, I went to work at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Ohio. And I can tell you that old hospital was a hell of a lot better than the prison that I worked in. And the sad thing that I found was many of the people that I had previously worked with and known in the hospital, I found myself working with in the prison. And prisons are unforgiving environments for anyone, but especially for those who are suffering from a serious mental illness. And as you know, many of the people that we have incarcerated in our jails and prisons are people who are suffering from mental illness. Then I became a congressman, and I became aware of the drug epidemic. And this was in the early 90s, before it was so prevalent, right? And I became aware of dirty doctors who were working in my hometown of Portsmouth, Ohio, and in Jackson, Ohio, and in Chillicothe, Ohio, and elsewhere, that were distributing prescriptions for $75 or $150 cash. No insurance, no credit cards, only cash. And I remember calling the Ohio Medical Association and registering my concern, and the response I got was, "Congressman, we can't tell our doctors how to practice medicine." And so we saw this scourge develop. And I lost a nephew, a 42-year-old nephew, not too many years ago on oxycodone overdose. But I'm really glad that you're having this gathering this morning for a lot of reasons. You know, I mentioned drug addiction. I mentioned psychiatric disorders, mental illnesses, and all the things that are connected to those conditions. And I was happy that Lori, at the end of her remarks, mentioned housing and a home. And I was reminded of an experience I had here in this county a couple of winters ago. I was spending some time living in Bromley Hall here at the university, visiting classes. And as I was driving from Columbus to Athens on this cold, snowy morning, bitterly cold morning, I passed a fellow just this side of Nelsonville, and he was hitchhiking. And normally I don't stop for hitchhikers, but there was something about this person and the coldness, and I stopped. It took me a while to decide to stop. So I was some ways up the road by the time my car stopped, and he came running up, and he got in the car. And he said, "Thanks for stopping. Most people don't stop these days, but I understand why." And as we were driving down the highway toward Athens, I asked him about himself. And he said, "I just got out of prison, and I'm on my way to drug treatment." And he talked to me about his daughter and his broken marriage, and he said, I wish I had a car, because if you have a car, it's easier to get a job. And he said, I haven't missed any of my drug treatments. If you miss 3 times, I think they kick you out of the program. I'm going to be a little late this morning, he said, but I don't think they'll care as long as I show up. So we drove down the highway. I dropped him off. He thanked me profusely for stopping. And I've thought about that person over the last 2 years, frequently. Here was an individual who was separated from his family, alienated from his daughter, a prison record, addicted to drugs, no car, trying to get to drug treatment on a cold winter morning. There are a lot of people who need our help and the help of our society. And whether it's mental illness, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's depression, we all know that those conditions exist. And so I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy about your leadership throughout this region, and NAMI's working obviously throughout the state of Ohio to try to address some of these critical issues. Now, we're going to hear from several people today, and we're going to have a panel here in just a few moments. But right now, I would like to introduce to you a fellow that I've known a long time. I've known him, John Carey, since he was an aide to Congressman Clarence Miller way back when we were both much younger. John serves today as the director of the Governor's Office of Appalachia. He's previously served as the Chancellor of Ohio's Department of Higher Education. He's implemented initiatives that increase collaboration among our colleges and universities and technical schools, local businesses, and community organizations. Prior to John, John has worked at Shawnee State University. He was the mayor of Wellston, Ohio, which is in Jackson County. He is a true Appalachian of great distinction. And so, John, please come and share your thoughts with us this morning.
Well, good morning. I'm very humbled to be here. Thank you, Governor, for the introduction. I actually remember when I met Governor Strickland when he was running for Congress back in the early 80s at the Jackson County Fair. And at that time, it was very nice. Glad to meet him. So he's working so hard, but he has no chance to win. But the governor certainly has proven me wrong as a very distinguished career, and I'm very humbled to be here. As I look at the list of speakers and hear people speak, I feel like I'm the least qualified person to address this assembly of people. But I am a community person that lives in this region, and I see firsthand the results of mental illness and coupled with the substance abuse disorder epidemic. And I'm very grateful that NAMI is hosting this conference here in this region, because as we make progress in some areas, in other areas we face pretty stern obstacles. When I was appointed to the governor's office of Appalachia in February by Governor DeWine, there's lots of things that the governor's office of Appalachia does. One of the things I knew that we all need to focus on was the substance abuse disorder epidemic, and we know that aligns very closely with mental illness and with suicide. And I've heard a lot of those stories, so I'm not going to take a lot of time because I want to make sure that the people that are the experts are out in the field have a chance to speak. But I do just want to say a couple things. One is, since we're in Appalachia and talking about the governor's office of Appalachia, I want to make sure that to define Appalachia for you. Ohio Appalachia is part of 13 states. There's 32 counties in the Appalachian Ohio region. It goes all the way up to Ashtabula County at Lake Erie, and comes all the way down across the southern part of the state to Claremont County in the Cincinnati area. And the governor's office of Appalachia includes me and one other person and an intern, so we're not a big agency, but we partner very closely with Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor in the cabinet agency. One of the things that Governor DeWine did when he appointed me to this position, he had me come to the cabinet room and speak to the cabinet, and he directed his cabinet to work with us to serve the people of Appalachia. And because of that, working with people like Director Criss, we're holding listening sessions. We've held one in Scioto County and Jackson County. This week we're holding one in Morgan, and we're holding two in Morgan and Washington County. Our next stop is Jefferson County, to identify the gaps and what are the policies that we can do, working with Recovery Ohio, working with mental health and addiction services to fill those gaps. Part of the ARC's mission is a part of that from the federal ARC is working with Recovery to Work. Those people that are impacted with mental health issues and with substance abuse issues, or both, giving the employers the tools and the communities the tools to get them back to work. And we do have employers that want to do that. You'll be hearing from Chief Ware later today. He's the chief of the police in the city of Portsmouth. He's part of the Substance Abuse Advisory Council, and ARC has set aside some money for substance abuse projects. So part of this listening session is to develop a strategy to access that funding so we can partner with you in addressing these needs. So as we move forward, let's continue to partner and keep in touch with NAMI, because transportation and housing is a big problem in this region for everyone. So imagine what it would be like for transportation and housing if you have mental illness or addiction. It makes it a very steep mountain. So as you talk about transportation strategies and housing strategies, please include us in the conversation at the Governor's Office of Appalachia, and we would like to be able to be an ally with you as you pursue those topics. So I look forward to learning a lot more today, and thank you for inviting me.
So today we are really fortunate to have 7 directors of the alcohol, drug, addiction, and mental health boards from our region. And I'm going to ask them to take their places at the podium. Earl Thomas from the 317 board here in Athens, Ohio. Sue Schultz from Adams, Lawrence, and Scioto counties. Pat Petrella from Jefferson County. Jane Devney from Belmont, Harrison, and Monroe counties. Robin Harris from Gallia, Jackson, and Meigs counties. And David Brown from Washington County. Welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you as we pose some questions to you going forward, and I'm going to ask you to just jump in, speak up, speak out. I know that none of you are wallflowers. None of you are afraid of talking. And so please participate as you choose. Now, not every director here has to answer every question that I pose, but I'll pose a series of questions for your consideration. The first question is, in your positions, what do you consider the greatest need for your ADAMH board area? And of course, you represent a vast area here in our great state of Ohio. So who wants to be first? What do you consider the greatest need that faces your ADAMH board area? And please make use of the mics there. Yes.
I am the shy one. They're all cringing. It's like, oh, don't let her talk first. I'm probably the least PC person in this group, so we'll just throw this out here, that we need funding. We need funding that is coordinated at the state level so that we aren't out there trying to find out, well, what is education doing about this? What is the court system doing about this? What is law enforcement doing? But that if in Columbus, each entity was encouraged to work together the way we work together in our local communities, which I believe is a strength of Appalachia, that we naturally come together in our communities and try to serve people in a coordinated effort. And sometimes the way funding comes down is detrimental to that. And we end up running around like the Keystone Cops trying to figure out what everyone else is doing when we're all trying to address the same problem. I also would ask for funding to remain stable. I'm old enough to have been around long enough to watch programs come and go. And if I could find out who the guy is in Columbus who swings the pendulum, I want him or her to just say, don't swing it so hard. Because there are places when we have found that magic place and things started to work really well. And then another biennial budget came along and away it went. If we had time to just keep tweaking what we're doing and work that out, because there are great solutions in our communities. We don't always have to have advice from everywhere else. It's wonderful to see what's happening across the country, and I want to know about those things. But there are great strengths in our communities, and we need the opportunity to look at that, to tweak that, with accountability. I wouldn't ever want accountability to go away, but we need flexibility. We need the ability to determine what works in our communities so that we can continue to serve people in a culturally appropriate manner.
So
Somebody else.
that's quite an answer, and I suspect that maybe, I know there's one person back here that also wants to speak up. So share with us your thoughts about this question.
We knew she shouldn't go first. We just knew it. But that's what we love about her. She frames things so well. I want to just make one tweak on one of the things or one of the points that Robin made. And we always talk about flexibility in our field. I'm not arguing for flexibility as much as I'm arguing for out-of-the-box creativity. So many things in the Ohio Revised Code or the Ohio Administrative Code or the rules or the regulations, they talk about flexibility, but if you really look at them, it does not promote creativity. And I think that we could be more creative about how we fund things such as housing and transportation if some of the rules and regulations were not there that could be and are generally interpreted as no's or as stop signs rather than caution and green lights.
Okay, now are there others of you who want to add to this answer?
I think the answers have been spot on with regards to behavior health services, but I never will miss the chance to say we need more jobs. We need jobs that pay a living wage. We need jobs with benefits. And that would also be very helpful with our communities. And people would be home, they'd have money for homes, money for families. So I never want to miss out on saying we need more jobs, living wages, benefits.
Wow. I'm not sure how we're going to solve that one, but I recognize the need, obviously. Are there others that would like to say something about this? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just going to add to that is workforce as a piece of it, meaning professionals, paraprofessionals that can contribute to our field. We need people that are licensed, that we can attract and retain in our communities. Unfortunately, people tend to get their experience in our communities and they move on to better paying jobs in another area. So that definitely is a need.
Thank you. Also, I'd like just to bring up, I know we're talking about with NAMI and mental health housing. We have an extreme need down in Adams, Lawrence, Scioto for those type of permanent supportive housing for anybody that has a mental illness. Right now, we really don't have any. We are working on one for transitional age youth who are coming out of foster care. That's a huge need in our area, but we need more for adults. And that is something that is extremely hard for our area to recoup, I guess, the money to be able to do that. So I'm looking for the state to try to pitch in. Unfortunately, I hate bringing this up, I always do. We are one of probably about 6 ADAMH boards now across the state that does not have a levy. So we do not have those type of flexible funds to be able to help bring that type of housing into our area. One other thing too is mental health crisis beds. I mean, we are lucky to have a 10-bed facility in Scioto County. 24-hour care, wonderful facility. However, that's in Scioto County. I have people in Adams County that has to drive hours, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on where they live, to get into our crisis center. And unfortunately, in Adams County, they have their most recent private ambulance company has went out of service. So they have one very, very small county ambulance service who cannot transport anybody from that area down to Scioto County, which is an hour, sometimes an hour and a half away. I don't have transportation funds to be able to pay for another private ambulance company to drive all the way down to Adams County, pick that person up, and bring them back. Same thing with Lawrence County. Unfortunately, Lawrence County really doesn't have a hospital of any type. They have a very, very small ER. So most of those clients have to go across the state line, either to Kentucky or West Virginia. We struggle down there trying to then get information back once they are released from that other state. We can't find out where they went, who's taking care of them. So we have a lot of different, issues in our area that we just need, and I hate keep going back to funding, but that would certainly be a lot easier for us to be able to have a place for anybody with a illness to live. And, if I can just somehow put a little plug in there for the state, flexible funding is huge for us, huge. I mean, yes, you guys are throwing money. We've got it. It's great, especially for the addiction side, which is a huge issue in our area, especially with what we had with all the pill mills in Scioto County. But we need more for mental health. More flexible funding is the biggest thing, so thank you.
Well, I'm impressed that so many of the answers have been directed towards my remaining questions, or many of my remaining questions. But thank you so much. Now, I have a question that I want to direct specifically to David Brown. Okay, David, you're the only one who hasn't talked thus far, so I'm going to give you an easy one.
Okay, good.
When we talk about access, we understand that there is a significant shortage in the mental health workforce in southeastern Ohio. That's been mentioned already. What steps should we be taking to incentivize the professionals we need to live and to work in Appalachia?
Well, you took one of those words right out of my mouth, is the incentivization. Is that a word? But to incentivize. I think what we have over here in Washington County, we have such a shortage of the workforce. On a good month, our local providers might be able to get a person in 25 days when they make that phone call. Of course, we all know when that person makes the phone call, they're ready today. They might change their mind, you know, the next day, oh, I'm feeling better, I can make it. Well, that doesn't work. That's on a good month. We've had months where it's 5 weeks. We track our providers and they report to us how long it takes. I think the state of Ohio needs to look at the schools who are helping put these licensed people out, be it bachelor's or master's degree, and, you know, incentivize them to come down to Southeast Ohio. I don't know, is it forgiving a portion of the student loan or something like that? But we need it. We need it today. We don't need it in 5 years. We need it today. I'd like to see the state step up and do something like that. You know, some of these funds that come down are so, you know, strict on how they can be used that we can't use them. Keep it at the state level. Basically pay these students or anyone else to come to Southeast Ohio. You know, help pay a salary sign-on bonus or something. You know, the state needs to look also on how to make these funds at their level less stringent.
So just let me ask you for a show of hands. Are there any of you who are not facing the kind of professional workforce shortage that David has described? So this is something that is generally true throughout the entire region.
Yes.
It's to the point where, and this is unacceptable behavior, but we have providers poaching each other for staff, and that just doesn't fly.
Maybe also looking at something creative. Are there people in similar professions or some other type of helping profession that they're seeing there's not a great need for their service in a particular area they originally chose? And is there a fast track way to get people into the professions that we need that could be licensed and could help fulfill some of the needs that we have with professionals?
I spent some time in the private sector working totally out of mental health. I ran a logistics warehouse for a grocery company. But one of the things, and I have my master's in business, by the way, which is not in mental health. One of the things that I think of when I think about workforce development and that I struggle with as a funder for agencies is the the overwhelming consuming intent on billing Medicaid. And the way that providers are not seeing their operations as a business operation and looking for creativity, looking for ways of working in different ways. I'll give you an example. This is not to get down onto providers, this is to encourage them to be creative and to think. I said to one of them one time, have you ever thought about offering your staff 4-day work weeks? Well, no, why would we do that? Well, because you can't always pay them as much, so some of the other opportunities are time and investments. Have you thought about giving them hazard pay if you're talking about sending them to a satellite clinic? I just wish that we could work together as a system, because when we talk to some of our providers, and we are having a hard time finding direct care staff, it is not always the money. We're talking about a younger group of individuals, and they're motivated by things often not necessarily financial. And so I'm trying to figure out how we as a system can start thinking creatively and thinking in a way to motivate people in ways that we old-timers have never, ever thought about using.
Some wonderful suggestions. And I've heard various kinds of incentives described here. And I think that might be something, where's Terry? Where's Terry Russell? Terry, that may be something that NAMI could sort of try to encourage among the various board directors. So when I was on the recovery group that the Governor DeWine set up, a lot of talk came about from people who say that they have nowhere to go for immediate crisis help. Mental health crises happen 24/7. There's not always an immediate place available, especially in the rural areas, where people can go to receive crisis services. And if it's a crisis, it may not be able to wait until the next day or the next week or the next month. So can you talk with us about the need for available crisis services in your community? What do you have, if any? And what do you need to make those kinds of crisis services available?
I think that many of my colleagues have or have brought up crisis units so that they are 24-hour a day crisis availability. We are looking at some type of a mobile crisis response, perhaps even that could cover more territory than just Jefferson County, to some of the counties that make sense and that are close to us. Again, that takes funding. It also takes creativity and looking at evidence-based programs that make the most sense for us.
So let me pose a situation. So say there's a family that's in crisis at 11:30 p.m. and they think their son or their daughter may be suicidal or for some other reason a threat to themselves or others. In your regions, what should that family do? How do they reach out? Who do they contact? And what services would be immediately available?
In our area, the response used to be the hospital emergency department. However, in the last less than 12 months, we've lost 2 hospitals. They've closed. The other 2 are of some distance from the largest population center. That is our response. We run right now a 24/7 crisis response, but because of limited staff, limited ability to respond, even though our crisis design, and we just had a meeting last week with our providers, our crisis design says 24/7 crisis intervention at the place closest to where the person is. So we're speaking about a vision for a crisis system that does that intervention in their home, in an agency, in a hospital, but not necessarily haul them out of that place and take them somewhere else. We don't have that yet. We have no ability to do crisis stabilization. We have no inpatient facilities. We have no crisis beds. We've done CIT training for law enforcement, but unfortunately a lot of crises still end up in arrests.
In our area, it's default to the hospital emergency rooms.
I'm sorry, sir?
In our area, I'm sorry. The hospital emergency rooms would be the entry point for crisis services in Athens, Hawking, and Benton. If it was determined that the person wasn't suffering some physical ailment that could be treated medically, we would have crisis workers in the emergency room to evaluate, stabilize, perhaps send home. Only 30% of our crisis calls result in a hospitalization. The real issue is with workforce having a shortage of crisis. For the crisis worker, you need an experienced, really good clinician, and there's just a shortage of those folks out there. So the wait times to get the crisis worker to the emergency room may be a few hours. Then if the person requires hospitalization, finding a hospital bed becomes the next challenge, because typically the state hospital is full every day, and finding a hospital bed, say in Columbus, can be a challenge. And then that also brings up the issue that the crisis workers done their job, but now they're helping find a place to send the person, and they may spend several hours doing that when maybe they should be responding to another crisis. So the lack of psychiatric bed availability, lengthens the time for crisis. The lack of, or the shortage of qualified professionals. But in our system, the emergency room would be the entry point for crisis. And we think that's an expensive way of doing things, and have studied and looked at other options such as urgent care for behavioral health services, because emergency rooms are expensive and busy, and perhaps we need to find a detour so we don't use them as much as we do now.
Anyone else want to speak to that issue?
I think it's also important to point out the lack of hospital beds for kids and where we are with kids in crisis. Many times kids present at emergency rooms the same as what others have talked about, but if they're in need of a psychiatric bed, they may sit in an emergency room for 48, 72 hours. Is not unheard of. That's a huge concern, a very, very big concern. I think we've seen an erosion of kids' services over the last several years, although it's encouraging that Governor DeWine has made a new commitment to services for kids. But really, we have to put an infrastructure back together. We're trying to rebuild, whether it's through the work of our Family and Children First councils, whether it's bringing, highly qualified people into our workforce who are able to work with kids and able and willing to do the really tough work of working in homes. But finding a place for kids in crisis is critical. We call ourselves together the App Care Boards. We're working on setting up a kids crisis center in one of the abandoned buildings at the Gallipolis Developmental Center. Now that's way down the road. My friends at Hopewell are going, don't announce that yet. But that's our first hope, to try to serve kids in crisis in the community, because otherwise we're sending them hours away where their families can hardly get there to be part of the child's treatment.
There in Washington County this last year, we had a child in the Belpre ER for a week before we could place that person. Now just imagine what that child's going through for a week. Imagine the family, what they're going through for a week instead of having something nearby available. And this is after checking primarily statewide for a crisis bed for a child. And like Robin here said, we are looking at sharing some costs. I don't like the idea that it's all the way down to Gallipolis. I don't even know how to get there from Marietta. But
You'll love it. It's a great town.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, I'm sure. But I'd like something closer, but I'll take what we can get. But by working together here, we help each other by making sure there's going to be a bed available for whatever child it is, wherever it comes from in our 21 counties. So we have to stand up and be counted and do things ourselves, basically, here in Southeast Ohio.
Mr. Brown, let me ask you a question. Who paid for that week-long stay in the emergency room?
I don't know. I know it wasn't me.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
But, I'm sure the hospital got it paid somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll find out.
Anyone else want to respond to this issue?
I think we're looking forward to the Crisis Academy that Director Criss talked about and Alicia from the department. I think we're looking for some creative answers to look at crisis and something that's different, that's evidence-based, that we can expand our work with crisis. So we're hoping as things come in, there might be funding available for us.
I think the thing that always, when I go out in the community, and I come from a 3-county board that is as rural as it is down here. I think one county has 15,000, two of the smaller counties have 15,000. And what I hear time and time again is, why can't we have it in our county? And it is so discouraging to try to explain to my constituents that you can't have an inpatient bed in every county. You can't have a facility in every county. You may have to go to one county over, and to get us to culturally understand that that's okay, and then to try to figure out a way to provide some transportation assistance to get them there is the thing that we struggle with, because they may be willing to go, but they don't have money to put gas in the car to get them there.
So this transportation issue is one that cuts across a lot of different kinds of problems. Let me ask you this one. Stigma and fear of discrimination still keep many people from reaching out for services and speaking openly about what they may be experiencing or feeling in their own lives. Do you see stigma as an issue in your communities? And let me ask this part of that question. What factor does Appalachian culture play in the stigma issue, if any, in your judgment?
Okay. Down in Adams, Lawrence, Scioto, people do not want to talk about mental health or anything that has to do with, and I'm just going to say, quote, crazy people. I hate to say that, but it's true, and you hear it on the street every day. They do not care about trying to better their neighbor. Unfortunately, we're still, soon to be 2020, we're still back in the 1930, 40, 50s attitude, where it comes to someone saying, you know what, we take care of our own, we don't want that outside help. But taking care of their own may be keeping them home, keeping them away from other people. We still have that. We still have it in the backwood area, the holler areas in our counties, and trying to reach those people, to make them understand and educate that, you know what, there is help out there, and we can do something. We can, there's the big stigma in our area of medication. They don't want them on medication. But that is what will make them a productive individual, to be able to go out and find a job if there's a job available, hopefully. But yeah, we struggle with stigma a lot. That was probably another reason we did not pass our levy. We went to 2 years in a row here 2 years ago. Could not beat that stigma down. Could not. It was every day we would be at somebody's door. Well, why do I want to help those people? I don't want my money going to that. It's a sad situation, it really is, but stigma is a huge, huge barrier in our area.
So do others experience that in your communities? And if so, what do you think can be done to diminish or to lessen that stigma?
I don't feel that stigma is an overpowering issue in our communities. What I do fear is the stigma attached to mental illness and violence. And I think we've got a cultural issue that we have to deal with in trying to explain that violence is not related significantly to mental illness. And that doesn't come across. And we face that every day from law enforcement. Bless their hearts, they're trying their darndest to do what's right, but they will say to me every day, well, the community is safer if these people are behind bars, because I don't know when the next one's going to become violent. So we've got to figure out a way to address that in our culture. And that's a different type of stigma than I think we're used to.
Well, and if I can interject myself as a moderator who's supposed to be totally objective, there's a real problem with trying to justify the 40,000 or so Americans that are killed with guns, associating that with with mental illness, and that's something that I think we've all got to push back on. Well,
And one of the ways we pushed back on it is our board had a position statement and a public position statement that they were willing to pass and put out there that says the very same thing. It's not related, and we've got to deal with cultural issues, and this is not about mental illness, this is about violence.
and not every dysfunctional, angry person is a mentally ill person. And that's something that I think needs to be stressed continuously. One more question for the panel. Let's see, let's make this question about NAMI. Let's get NAMI in here. How can a community organization or your community organizations that you associate with, like NAMI and others, be most supportive of your local efforts? And can you talk about the importance of local community relationships and collaborating to best serve your communities?
I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I will. The local organizations need to have a relationship with their representatives or anyone who will listen in Columbus. Columbus is sick and tired of hearing from us, and it's the same old, and they're thinking, well, it's the same old. But if we get the, populace to, make a phone call, say, this concerns me, I'm a witness to this, my child is having issues with that, and then they might, if you get their ear, they might start listening. Yes, we have our meetings with, state people, not to be picking on y'all, but they want to hear from more people. They need to hear from more people. So then the problem becomes real, not just one that I might have between my, with my county or anything like that. They need to hear that it's statewide, area-wide down here in Appalachia, southeast Ohio. We need more voices.
I think one thing that we've been doing, and maybe it circles around to my previous comments, but in engaging the community, even with the stigma issue, sometimes stigma is what keeps people from engaging with us. We have made an effort to go straight to the biology of mental health and substance use so that people can move away from that belief that someone is just choosing to behave badly or someone just choosing to use substances. We've even gone into our local high schools and presented at biology, anatomy, and physiology classes. When they're studying the brain, we go in and teach them about what the brain actually looks like. You can show them scans of what happens when a person is addicted or suffering from some mental illness, so that we take away that idea that this person is choosing something and we bring it into biology. It seems that people are more willing to talk. And then that's how we have been able to engage the community. I serve Gallia, Jackson, and Meigs counties. A recent report out of Ohio University says that Meigs County has the highest suicide rate in the state, and that Gallia Jackson is number 3. I think Hawking County is in there at number 2. I wear that like a ball and chain. I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
As far as, for whatever it means, I'm at the top of the behavioral health system for those 3 counties. People are afraid. Parents are looking to us and saying, I'm afraid to discipline my child. What if he kills himself? Everyone can see that shadow hanging over them. And I see Tony Coder here, that we rely upon heavily on what are we saying to our community about suicide? What are we saying to our community about substance use? I stood with a mother whose son came home injured and traumatized from Afghanistan. And then I stood with her while he was taken to prison. A man with a Purple Heart is in prison today because there wasn't help to overcome his trauma. And he was never going to overcome the addiction until somebody treated the trauma. We have to demand better than that.
Wow. So a great panel, but no better way to end this panel
Oh, I wasn't
than what
finished, but
you
I'll end.
just said. You all have heavy responsibilities. Thank you for what you do. Let's thank our panel for their thoughts. Welcome. Return to your seats.
I want to thank this panel too, but what you heard here today is why we're here, why we're in Southeast Ohio today. When they say go to this legislature and go to the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services,
so much.
the whole crisis meeting that's going to be held, we need to get that money. There's $38 million was allocated in the legislature. It needs to come here as much as it does into Franklin or Cuyahoga or Toledo. They have resources this community does not have, and there has to be a priority. So that's why, and I want to thank the leaders, because they need your help. They need your voice. Somebody said that.
Well, great panel. Thank you so much, but there's more to come. Mental health does not discriminate. You know that. It affects 1 in 5 of our citizens within the great state of Ohio. When talking about mental illness, we have to speak about its impact on children and our youth. Today, we have a very special person with us, Matti-Lynn Chrisman, Miss Ohio 2018. Matti-Lynn, who is in June passed on her crown to another Miss Ohio, but she served for 1 year. Matti is an advocate, a dedicated advocate for mental health awareness and treatment. Matti's motivation comes from personal experience by dealing with anxiety and depression. And we're so pleased to have Matti with us today. Matti, would you please come and speak with us?
Oh, this mic was really tall. How you guys doing? Good. If everybody wants to do a good stretch, that was an awesome panel, but I sat there like this. And so I got a little stiff, so if anybody else needs to stretch it out, I understand. My name's Matti-Lynn Chrisman. I am Miss Ohio 2018. I passed on my crown, like they said, back in June to an amazing Miss Ohio. Her name is Caroline Grace Williams, and she's currently out and about doing the Lord's work, but she has a little bit of a different platform than what I had. I have only been advocating for mental health for probably about 3 years, and I was very, very blessed to do it statewide as Miss Ohio and take my campaign to Miss America and do it nationally. And the Miss America program is very unique in the fact that it gives scholarship money to its winners. So the Miss America program paid for my BFA in musical theater, and in December I'll graduate with a second bachelor's degree in public communications, and I will be in very little debt. The Miss America program also gives women a lot of really amazing opportunities, and I started in pageants when I was 15. I was not like toddlers and tiaras nightmare child, I promise. But this program and the people in it kind of became my family and my support system. And it actually took me 3 tries to become Miss Ohio. I didn't win right away. When I tell people that I was Miss Ohio, a couple things start to happen. So some people kind of shut down and stop listening to me because what would I know? I'm some, pageant queen, like what would I know about mental health? And then some people start to hyper listen, and they want to make sure that everything that comes out of my mouth sounds exactly like what they want a Miss Ohio to sound like. And it doesn't, I promise. And the other people, who are my favorite people, they just aren't fazed. I'm just a person, and that's the kind of thing that I like. The first reaction I get from people a lot of times is, well, you don't really seem like a Miss Ohio. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're not blonde and tall, and you're not an airhead, and you're not this, you're not that. Some people try to make it a compliment, but I'll tell you that a lot of the girls are not what you think a Miss Ohio should be like. When I tell people that depression has controlled 90% of my adult life, dozens of things begin to happen. Some people start to feel sorry for me. Some people who weren't listening before are now listening. And some people are doubting that I'm telling the truth. That happens a lot for some reason. And people kind of say their first reaction is, well, you don't seem depressed. And I'm just like, okay, well, have you ever seen a Robin Williams movie? Or people will say, well, if your depression's so bad, if this is so bad, how did you win Miss Ohio? And that's kind of the story I'm going to tell today. So I grew up not far from here. I grew up in Cambridge, Ohio, and we were also the Bobcats, so go Bobcats. I had a great childhood. My parents loved me and gave me everything that they possibly could. I had amazing grades. I had awesome friends. I was in every extracurricular activity under the sun. You name it, I was part of it. But by the time I was 17, I kind of realized that there was something extremely wrong with me. I didn't have the words to explain what I was going through. And when I tried, it came out wrong. It came out very ugly, and it came out as representing something that wasn't actually what I was meaning to say. I felt angry all the time, and lonely all the time, and dark. Like, I didn't know you could feel dark, but everything was dark. And when I went off to college, things got much worse. And I went to college at Kent State. I still go there. And my support system was over 2 hours away. So all of these new friends and classmates and dorm mates and professors, they didn't know who I was. They had no idea who I had been before coming to Kent State. So it was very easy for all of them to say, oh, well, she's just standoffish, or, you know, she's just shy, or she's just mean. And I was also given some really bad advice by somebody who I promised they thought they had my best interest at heart, but somebody who said, don't tell, because people won't want to be your friend, people won't want to hire you, people won't want to be in a relationship with you, you carry extra baggage, you carry extra weight. And that advice instilled an anxiety inside of me that I, to this day, still cannot get over. You can hear my voice shaking right now. I'm not nervous. I've given this speech 1,000 times. I just have anxious tics still because somebody told me the wrong thing at the wrong time. But this advice heightened my anxiety, and I was just constantly praying that the person next to me didn't notice the bags under my eyes, or that I'd failed another exam, or that I could talk my professor into not failing me because I'd missed so many classes. And I only wanted to hide. It got to the point where I was giving up everything that put me in front of another human being. Everything except for pageants, for some reason, and I'm not exactly sure why. In 2015, I went to Miss Ohio for the first time as a Miss contestant. I did the teen program previously, but I went there, and it was the worst week of my life. You're there for about 10 days, and you do all these events and all these rehearsals, and you compete, and it's supposed to be a lot of fun. It was a living nightmare. I was having anxiety attacks. I was throwing up randomly in the bathroom. I was exhausted, and I was just on the verge of tears the entire time. Clearly, I didn't even get in the top 10 at Miss Ohio that year, and it was a real big struggle. And I went back to school that year, and everything continued to get worse and worse and worse and worse. I broke up with somebody I'd been dating for 2 whole years. I lost all of my friends, and I lost all of my hobbies. And when I started to compete to go back to Miss Ohio that next year, I couldn't win a local title. So it works like anything else. You win a local, and that takes you to state, and you go to state, and that takes you to nationals. I couldn't win a local to get back to the Miss Ohio stage. And every time I tried, every loss validated that feeling of worthlessness. Like, oh, that panel of judges thought you were worthless too, so you must be. And things just grew so much darker to the point I came home that summer to work at a local radio station, actually, to do an internship. And my mom saw me for the first time in a couple of months. I'm 5'6", and I weighed 99 pounds. And my mom lost it. And she almost didn't let me go back to school that next year. But I will say that degree in musical theater, I'm a very good actress, and the fact that I can pretty much make people believe I'm okay even when I'm not. And in 2017, I had isolated myself so far that I didn't even have an identity. I didn't know who I was, and everything that I had identified with was gone. I lost everything, and one night I almost lost my life. And that next morning, I woke up, and I was already crying, and I didn't even know that was possible. And right now, I'm about to cry, and you'd think that I had been telling the story for the first time. But I didn't know that you could just wake up and already be crying. And I did. And this voice in my head was just like, that's enough. And that was it. And that voice in my head was so sure of itself and so confident and so definite, that's enough. And I got up and I went to the first person that I trusted, and I just told them everything. And I mean everything, things they probably didn't even want to know. But to make a long story short, that year I got back to Miss Ohio and I got second runner-up. You don't have to clap for that. But releasing myself from isolation made me a whole new person. Not to say that I was cured in any way, but letting myself be happy or sad or angry or whatever I wanted released me from so much pain. And when I started telling people what I had been going through, I was surprised at how many people wholeheartedly understood. And how many people said, you know, I thought something was wrong, but I just didn't want to say anything. Getting better has been a really long journey that I'm still on, and I will probably be on for the rest of my life. And when I decided to go back to Miss Ohio in 2018, I said, I'm changing my platform because I'm going to go back to Miss Ohio as a warrior. Previously, my platform, my social impact initiative, what we call it, every girl in the Miss America organization has one. It's just her heart's work, something that she does in her community so that her crown is more than just a pretty object on her head. It's something that creates change. And so previously, mine had been about promoting extracurricular activities in children and raising funds so that at-risk kids could get the different things that they needed to participate in extracurricular activities. And I told my support group, I'm going to change my platform. It's going to be about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And everyone was like, whoa. No. Everybody was like, why would you want total strangers to know all of this stuff about you? And why would you want something so personal about you to be the thing that you fight for? Why are you going to put yourself through that? And I thought about these questions a lot, and I think it's just because I lived in fear for so long, fear that was so useless. Everything that I created and told myself in my head was 1,000 times scarier than anything anybody could throw at me because of judgment. I was living in fear that was disabling. But telling my story and talking about it not only validated what happened to me, but gave me control because I had the power now, because I recognized what had happened, and I was able to help others maybe recognize it in themselves and get the help that they needed. So in 2018, I created a campaign called Pain Isn't Always Obvious, and it teaches mental health awareness and suicide prevention to people of all age groups in an age-appropriate way. So for kids, we talk about mood management, and we talk about the words that we can use when we feel sad or angry or overwhelmed and who we can talk to. We talk about bullying. With teenagers, we talk all about the same thing, and we talk about the do's and the don'ts when maybe coming up to somebody and seeing if they're okay and the tips and tricks for suicide prevention and getting people the resources that they need. But it also focused on adults, especially the elderly, because we kind of have to break down this brick wall that says, it's okay to talk about this now. Like, we're okay now, you're in a safe place now, especially veterans. I have a very, very, very special place in my heart for veterans. During my year as Miss Ohio, I think I visited almost every VA clinic in Ohio. There were a couple that I missed, I won't lie, but I made it a point to do so because they deserve a lot from us because they gave a lot. But even though I was doing all of this good as Miss Ohio and doing all of these things for people, people were still asking me, why? Why are you doing this? Is this not affecting you? How are you getting through the day? And I always tell a story, and if you were at the State House back in, what's that, March, May? She's there, she got me. I told this story back in May at the State House when NAMI was there. I was at a princess pancake breakfast, which is the exact thing that you expect Miss Ohio to be at. And I was signing autographs, and we were singing Disney princess songs and eating pancakes. It was so fun. It was the cutest event in the world. And it started to wrap up, and all the kids were going into the next room. There was like this play area, some sort of children's museum, I don't know. And this mom comes back in, and she comes up to me, and she says, "Can I introduce you to my daughter? It's really important." And I was just like, oh, okay. Her daughter didn't get an autograph or a picture, and she wanted to. That's perfectly fine. And she kind of said, "No, you don't understand. My daughter's like you." She had one of my autograph cards, and on the back, it kind of talked about my story and my platform, kind of my way to normalize the conversation if I don't actually get to talk to you. And she just said, "My daughter last night cried herself to sleep because the girls at school bully her for her anxiety, because it makes her stutter, it makes her shaky, causes her to pretty much shut down. And she's not making any friends, and last night she told me that there was no one else like her." So I'm like, yeah, absolutely, bring her in. Like, I would love to talk to her. And the mom leaves the room, and I all of a sudden realize that there was no child at this event over the age of 10. And I have no idea what little girl is about to walk in here and expect me to have all the answers and say the perfectly right thing. So this little girl comes walking in. She's 8. For all intents and purposes, I'm going to call her Jessica. It's not her real name. But Jessica and I sit down and we start talking, and I'm asking her, who do you talk to when you feel anxious? And she's like, "Oh, my mom, my grandma, my cousin." I'm like, "Well, what do you do when you're anxious?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I just kind of get quiet and try to calm myself down." And she's actually very articulate, explaining the things that clearly she's been through therapy. She's been through things. People have worked with her. I can see that. And I just realized in that moment that I just had to give her as much encouragement as I possibly could. And I don't know if you probably can't see it from that far away, but my hands are constantly shaking. They don't really ever stop. It's probably a little heightened right now because I'm a little more anxious standing in front of all of you guys. But I just showed her my hands, and she was so relieved. And her mom explained to her that I was like her. And she started crying and was so happy because not only had she found somebody like her, but she had found a Miss Ohio like her. And from then on out, whenever I told that story, people stopped asking me why. Because they could see why. They saw the need. It was clear that even if I had to do all of this just for her, I would do it 100 times. Sorry. This has been said multiple times today, but mental health doesn't see age or where you come from. It doesn't see your ethnicity or your sexual orientation. It sees nothing but humans. And I didn't know how else to explain it to people until I met that little girl. And I think about her almost every day. We actually, as I was sharing some like tips and tricks with her, I wear baseball caps when I feel really, really anxious. I don't know what it is, but something about pressure on the entire circumference of my skull makes everything a little bit better. And I told her that, and a couple weeks later, I had gotten an email from her mom, and it was a picture of her in front of her school with a new friend that she had made, and she was wearing a baseball cap because her principal allowed her to use those during school when she was feeling anxious. The funny thing is about all of this stuff, nothing's funny about all of this stuff, but I come to places like this and I tell my story to people like you guys, and it's not you that I have to convince. And that's the funny part. The real work has to be done when we leave these four walls and we're out in the world. I am open with every single person who asks me why my hands are shaking. I will waste 10 minutes of your life to tell you the entire story, and I don't care. Because now, between me and you, that conversation is normal. And if you were going through something right there in that moment, you could tell me, because I just told you something that you probably didn't want to know. I also reach out to people who I think are in a bad place, and a lot of times I'm wrong. A lot of times I'm reading too much into it, but I still reach out anyway. And I fight for myself. That sounds really selfish, but I fight for others, but I fight for myself too. Because if I'm not in a healthy place, I can't help anybody else. And that's what I encourage everybody here to do, because we are going to be the light and the hope and the only thing that matters and the only voices that are heard in the fight to come. Because when people hear our stories and when people hear us, they speak up and they feel like they have permission to share their stories as well. I'm very, very lucky to be standing here at all, and very, very lucky to be in this room with all of you wonderful people who are ready to fight the good fight. Normally at this time, I would let people ask questions if they wanted to, but if we are on a tight schedule, okay, awesome. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I always try to tell people, you know, this might be the only time that you ever get to ask a Miss Ohio a question. I don't know.
So if anyone has questions, I have a mic. I'll just pass it around the room so that everyone can hear. We do have about 10 minutes until lunch, and our next speaker is running a little bit late, so please do ask questions.
Hi, Maddie.
Hi.
I've recently had several conversations with youth ambassadors, and I'm getting ready to hold another one Wednesday at the Attorney General's Conference. One of the conversations we're having about the youth in general, resiliency and anxiety. Having been on that platform and obviously connected with social media, what impact do you feel social media has in this sense of maybe a lack of self-worth, or it was phrased to me as chasing an ideal life that does not exist because of what others post? I was just wondering if you had any insight on that as it relates to adolescents and teenagers.
Absolutely, I do. I think a lot of what you see online is fake, and a lot of people try to live up to a fake potential of something that is inconceivable, because those people posting it don't even live that life. Those photos are photoshopped and faked and cropped and changed in all sorts of different ways. And that's one of the things that my Pain Isn't Always Obvious campaign talked about, especially with teenagers. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like social media influencers. That's their title for a reason. They want you to want to live their life. But I know some social media influencers, and trust me, their lives aren't that glamorous. It's all a commercial. It's all an advertisement. That's half of what social media is today. A lot of the girls in the Miss America program go out of their way to show realness and to show truth. Not everyone, not 100% of the time, but we try our best. One of my friends, her name's Alice Magato, she's actually Miss Ohio USA right now. She competed at Miss USA, which, yes, Miss USA and Miss America are two very, very, very different things. Anyway, but she has a platform where it's called Beauty Unedited, I believe. But she has her own website where you can go and you can upload a picture that's unedited, and it puts this little sticker in the bottom of the corner that's like, this photo is unedited, and we're proud of that kind of thing. And people can post them on social media, and it creates this big wave of, it's okay to not filter all your photos, and it's okay that you don't live this glamorous life because you are real, and that's what the world really needs.
Anyone else? Okay, we will have time for questions at the end with everyone who speaks today. So if you think of any other questions, Maddie will be back this afternoon. So Governor Strickland, if you want to give us our lunch instructions, please.
Thank you, everybody.
Isn't she terrific? Let's give her another round of applause. Well, we're going to break for lunch. Anyone hungry? Lunch is going to be served buffet style in the ballroom lobby. That's where you registered. There are 2 buffets with the same food on both sides. And so there'll be a